Ahoy, Miss Burkholz.
Ahoy, Miss Klein.
You guys, this is our Lesson 38 podcast entitled The Age of Exploration. There is a guiding question for this lesson, and it is, how did the Age of Exploration change the way Europeans viewed the world?
And our vocab is age of exploration, capitalism, cartography, colony, cottage industry, epidemic, market economy, and mercantilism.
All right, the introduction begins. If you want to follow along, run 535, you guys. The Age of Exploration was a period of discovery that lasted from about 1418 to 1620. During this time, European explorers made numerous daring voyages that changed the world.
A major reason for these voyages was the desire to discover ocean routes to East Asia, which Europeans called the Indies. When Christopher Columbus sailed west across the Atlantic Ocean, he was looking for such a route. Although he thought he had reached the Indies, Columbus had actually reached the Americas. Eventually, Europeans would realize that Columbus had found what they called the New World, and the Indies in the Atlantic became the West Indies. European nations soon rushed to claim lands in the Americas and elsewhere.
All right, early explorers often suffered terrible hardships. So, why did explorers brave such dangers? In this lesson, you're going to discover some of the reasons for the Age of Exploration. You will learn about the voyages of explorers from Portugal, Spain, and other European countries. You will also learn how the Age of Exploration changed the way people viewed the world.
Section 1, the causes of European exploration. Why did European exploration begin to flourish in the 1400s? Two main reasons stand out. First, Europeans of this time had several motives for exploring the world. Second, advances in knowledge and technology helped to make the Age of Exploration possible.
For early explorers, one of the primary motives for exploration was the desire to establish new trade routes to Asia. Europeans were especially interested in spices from Asia.
Trade with the East, however, was difficult and very expensive, in part because Muslims and Italians controlled the flow of goods.
European monarchs and merchants wanted to break the hold that Muslims and Italians had on trade. One way to do so was to find a sea route to Asia.
Other motives also came into play. Many people were excited by the opportunity for new knowledge, while explorers sought the chance to earn fame and glory as well as wealth.
A final motive for exploration was the desire to spread Christianity beyond Europe.
Advances in knowledge and technology. The Age of Exploration began during the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a time of new learning when a number of advances occurred that made it easier for explorers to venture into the unknown.
One key advance was in cartography, or the art and science of map making. An Italian scholar translated an ancient book called Guide to Geography from Greek into Latin. And then the book was written by the thinker Ptolemy.
European mapmakers used Ptolemy's work as a basis for drawing more accurate maps. Discoveries by explorers provided mapmakers with new information to use. The result was a dramatic change in Europeans' view of the world.
In turn, better maps made navigation easier. An improved ship design also helped explorers. A new type of ship was built called a caravel. These ships were small, fast, and simple to maneuver and had special bottoms that made it easier for explorers to travel along coastlines where the water was shallow.
Along with better ships, new navigational tools helped sailors travel more safely on the open seas. The compass, which sailors used to find their bearing, and the astrolabe helped sailors determine their distance north or south from the equator.
Finally, improved weapons gave Europeans a huge advantage over the people they met in their explorations.
Section 2, Portugal begins the Age of Exploration. The Age of Exploration began in Portugal, a small country located on the Iberian Peninsula.
All right, the major figure in early Portuguese exploration was Prince Henry, the son of King John I of Portugal. Beginning in about 1418, Henry sent explorers to sea almost every year. He also started a school of navigation where sailors and mapmakers could learn their trades.
Henry's early expeditions focused on the west coast of Africa. In 1488, Bartholomew Diaz became the first European to sail around the southern tip of Africa.
In July 1497, Vasco da Gama set sail with 4 ships to chart a sea route to India.
In May 1498, da Gama arrived in the port of Calicut, India.
His trip increased the Portuguese's eagerness to trade directly with Indian merchants. In 1500, Pedro Cabral set sail for India with a fleet of 13 ships. He sailed so far west that he reached the east coast of present-day Brazil.
He returned to Portugal in June 1501. Portugal's explorers explored the coast of Africa and brought back gold and enslaved Africans. They also found a sea route to India.
Okay, all right. Now, let's continue on. Portugal's control of the Indian Ocean ended Muslim and Italian control over Asian trade. During the 1500s, Portugal also began to establish colonies in Brazil. The native people of Brazil suffered greatly as a result, in part because the Portuguese forced them to work on sugar plantations or large farms.
Countless natives died from overwork and from European diseases. The colonization of Brazil also negatively affected Africa as well. The Portuguese needed more laborers, so they turned to Africa beginning in the mid 1500s. Over the next 300 years, ships brought millions of enslaved West Africans to Brazil.
All right, now let's move on to Spain's early explorations. In the late 1400s, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain were determined to make their country a powerful force in Europe. It was Ferdinand and Isabella who sponsored the voyages of Christopher Columbus. The Italian-born Columbus thought that the Indies, or Eastern Asia, lay on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean and believed sailing west would be the easiest route to reach it.
In August 1492, 3 ships left Spain under Columbus's command. On October 12th, a lookout sighted land. Columbus went ashore on an island in the Caribbean Sea and claimed it for Spain.
In March 1493, Columbus arrived back in Spain and proudly reported that he had reached Asia. Many Europeans, however, believed that Columbus had actually found a landmass between Europe and Asia. One of those was Ferdinand Magellan.
Magellan believed he could sail west to the Indies if he found a strait or channel through South America. Magellan won Spain's support for a voyage to find the strait and, in August 1519, set sail with 5 ships and about 250 men.
Magellan looked for the strait all along South America's east coast and finally found it at the southern tip of the continent, and today it's called the Strait of Magellan.
After passing through the strait, Magellan reached the Pacific Ocean in November 1520, but it took another 3 months to cross the Pacific.
In April of 1521, Magellan was killed in fighting. Magellan's crew sailed to the Spice Islands, and 3 years after their expedition began, the only ship to survive the expedition returned to Spain. The 18 sailors on board were the first people to actually travel completely around the Earth.
Wow, the early Spanish explorations greatly changed Europeans' view of the world.
Columbus's voyages marked the beginning of Spanish settlement in the West Indies, which earned Spain great wealth.
The Spanish also brought new crops such as sweet potatoes and pineapples to Europe.
For the native people of the West Indies, however, Spanish settlement was extremely detrimental. The Spanish forced native people to work as slaves in the mines and on the plantations, and priests forced many of them to become Christians.
Like Portugal, Spain looked to West Africa for new laborers. From 1518 through the mid-1800s, the Spanish brought millions of enslaved Africans to work in their American colonies.
All right, Section 4, later Spanish exploration and conquest. After Columbus's voyage, Spain was eager to claim even more lands in the New World. And in 1519, Spanish explorer Hernan Cortez and a band of fellow conquistadors set out to explore present-day Mexico.
Cortez and his men reached the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan. The Aztec ruler, Montezuma II, welcomed the Spanish with great honors. Determined to break the power of the Aztecs, Cortez took Montezuma hostage.
Okay, all right. In response, the Aztecs rose up against the Spanish, and Cortez mounted a siege of the city, aided by thousands of native allies who resented Aztec rule. 4 factors contributed to the defeat of the Aztec Empire. First, Aztec legend had predicted the arrival of a white-skinned god.
Second, Cortez was able to make allies of the Aztecs' enemies. Third, their horses, armor, and superior weapons gave the Spanish an advantage in battle. Fourth, the Spanish carried diseases that caused deadly epidemics among the Aztecs.
All right, now we're moving on. In April of 1532, the Incan emperor Atahualpa greeted the Spanish as guests. Following Cortez's example, Pizarro launched a surprise attack and kidnapped the emperor. The explorations and conquest of the conquistadors transformed Spain.
Besides gold and silver, ships from the Americas brought corn and potatoes to Spain. These crops grew well in Europe, and the increased food supply helped spur a population boom. Conquistadors also introduced Europeans to new luxury items such as chocolate.
The Spanish conquest had major impact in the New World. They destroyed 2 advanced civilizations, with the Aztecs and the Incas losing much of their culture along with their wealth. Many became laborers for the Spanish, and millions died from disease.
Soon, England, France, and the Netherlands all sent expeditions to North America.
The Italian sailor John Cabot made England's first voyage of discovery. In 1497, he landed in what is now Canada.
Sailing on behalf of the Netherlands, English explorer Henry Hudson journeyed to North America in 1609. Hudson wanted to find a northwest passage through North America to the Pacific Ocean.
Hudson did not find a Northwest Passage, but he did explore what is now called the Hudson River in present day New York State.
Unlike the conquistadors in the South, Northern explorers did not find gold and other treasure. As a result, there was less interest at first in starting colonies in that region.
All right, by the early 1600s, Europeans had set up a number of trading posts in North America. English exploration also contributed to a war between England and Spain. As English ships roamed the seas, some captains nicknamed Sea Dogs began raiding Spanish ports and ships to take their gold.
In 1588, King Philip II of Spain sent an armada or fleet of ships to invade England. Fewer than half of the ships made it back to Spain. The defeat of the Spanish Armada marked the start of a shift in power in Europe.
All right, the impact of exploration on Europe. As a result of exploration, more goods, raw materials, and precious metals entered Europe. Exploration and trade contributed to the growth of capitalism. This economic system is based on investing money for profit.
Instead of having a fixed price, items were sold for prices set by the open market. This meant that an item's price depended on how much of the item was available and how many people wanted to buy it. This kind of system, based on supply and demand, is called a market economy.
Increasingly, people began working for hire instead of directly providing for their own needs. Merchants hired people to work from their own cottages, turning raw materials from overseas into finished products. This growing cottage industry was especially important in the manufacture of textiles.
A final result of exploration was a new economic policy called mercantilism. European rulers believed that building up wealth was the best way to increase a nation's power. Having colonies was a key part of this policy.
All right, you guys, here is our summary. European explorers sought wealth and labor for their monarchs, as well as knowledge and adventure for themselves. They also wanted to spread Christianity. A number of advances in knowledge and technology made their journeys possible.
In the early 1400s, under the leadership of Prince Henry the Navigator, the Portuguese became the first to purposefully explore the seas beyond Europe. They explored Africa's coast, charted a sea route to South Asia, and claimed Brazil for Portugal.
All right, the voyages of Christopher Columbus led to Spanish colonization in the Americas. Hernan Cortez and Francisco Pizarro conquered vast areas in Mexico and South America. The Aztecs and Incan empires were destroyed. West Africans suffered greatly when they were brought to the Americas as slaves.
England, France, and the Netherlands sent explorers to North America. The expeditions of Henry Hudson were the basis of Dutch land claims in what is now the Hudson River Valley and English land claims in Canada.
All right, exploration vastly increased Europeans' knowledge. New foods led to a population explosion. Investments in expeditions and colonies contributed to the growth of capitalism, a market economy, cottage industry, and mercantilism.
All right, you guys, that is lesson 38 on the Age of Exploration. Our guiding question is, how did the Age of Exploration change the way Europeans viewed the world?
And don't forget vocabulary words: Age of Exploration, capitalism, cartography, colony, cottage industry, epidemic, market economy, and mercantilism.
All right, I'm out.
Goodbye.